Mr. Kaplan, thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Pleased to be here.
We've been awaiting the Supreme Court decision for days now. What was your reaction when you saw their decision tonight?
I was surprised. I think that there's only one thing to me that's clear from reading the decision tonight, and that's that this particular procedure for this particular family has been blocked. I think that Texans might be very upset about this decision, and that I think that they would be upset in particular that judges are involved in personal medical decisions that are private.
You said you're surprised. What stuck out to you?
I think that the only thing that was clear to me from reading the decision is that this procedure is blocked. The rest is hard for me to discern. And so as we digest this order and the Supreme Court's words over the coming days and weeks, and as doctors try to treat their patients, I think we're going to learn more about what this really means in the real world.
It is difficult to square the impact of this ruling and the reasoning that they give for it, because yes, it does revert the lower court's ruling, thus taking away Ms. Cox's right to an abortion, correct? But when you read the reasoning, it sounds very deferential to women and their doctors. I mean, it even says that our ruling today does not block a life-saving abortion in the very case of Ms. Cox. How do you square those two things?
I think it says it may not. But the Zarowski case, which is pending before the same Texas Supreme Court, may give some clarity. We hope will give some actual clarity to families, to hospitals, to doctors about what the medical exception really means in practice. When is the medical exception really going to allow life-saving medical care or fertility-saving medical care? We still, I think, don't know the answer to this question.
Yeah. Have you gotten the chance, or has your team gotten the chance to speak with Ms. Cox and her family?
My understanding is that, like so many people, everyone, including the Cox family, are upset by the Supreme Court's order. I certainly was upset that the court issued the order it did, but I'm heartened to know that in the Zarowski case, which is still pending before the court, there's still time to sort of give some clarity here and create a functional medical exception when women need health care. Not every pregnancy, unfortunately, is going to work out the way that we hope and dream.
Yeah.
And that's really what the Cox case was about. It's about a family that wanted another kid. They wanted to have a baby. And it just, unfortunately, they got the worst news, a fatal fetal abnormality. What now if you're in Texas and you're unfortunately in that situation? I think the answer is we still don't know what happens to the next couple that has to deal with this.
Yeah, you know, we were talking earlier and you got emotional because you're right. So often we talk about this in the political sense or the legal sense, but this is deeply personal for one family, one woman. How do you deal with that, and how has this whole giant international story affected them?
All I can say is I'm proud to be Texas counsel for the Cox family and for Amanda Zarowski and Lauren Miller and 20 women and 2 doctors in the Zarowski case. They're all personally affected by these decisions. Like some of the testimony we heard in the Zarowski case already months ago was just absolutely heartbreaking. The whole courtroom was in tears. It's really real, right? And so I think that people are upset that they feel like politicians are playing a game with their real families and their real healthcare needs. And I hope that's not true, right? I hope that the answer is that there will be a functional medical exception. I also hope that everyone agrees that there ought to be an exception to save the life of the mother, to save the fertility of the mother so she can have another baby after the procedure is done. But I don't know after reading the order. I don't know.
Well, help me make sense of this, because you're right. The implication for Ms. Cox as an individual is that she cannot get an abortion, at least right now, based on the lower court's ruling. But the language that the Supreme Court uses in that rationale sounds like it may set your position up for a better circumstance in the future. Y'all are speaking the same language in a lot of these excerpts. I mean, the court says that the law leaves to physicians, not judges, both the discretion and the responsibility to exercise their reasonable medical judgment. Mm-hmm. Is that not a good foundation on which to build the future of your arguments? That sounds like that's exactly what you were saying, where this is up to doctors, not judges.
It's up to the Supreme Court judges in the Zarowski case to make the right decision and let doctors treat their patients within their reasonable medical judgment.
So you don't see any more clarification or precedent set by this opinion here? I
guess I can say that I'm personally hopeful that this is a sign that in the Zarowski case we will get a positive decision for mothers, for doctors, for OBs, mm-hmm. for maternal fetal medicine doctors across the state. But we don't know. It's up to the Texas Supreme Court. The case was submitted. It's a different case, and they have to wrestle with similar but different issues. So I think, we now know that the Cox case, the temporary restraining order is blocked. The case was sent out of the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. The Zarowski case is still there, and mm-hmm. we're hopeful that the Supreme Court will come to the right decision for Texas parents.
I sat down with Chief Justice Hecht just last week before Ms. Cox's legal battles really played out. But I did ask him about Zarowski and where his mind is there. He couldn't share much about the merits of that case because it's pending, but he did stress that he's worried about how politicized this has all become, and he wants the public to believe that when opinions like this and in Zarowski do come out, that the public believes that it's not political and they were just following the law. Do you believe that this was a purely legal opinion and was not influenced by politics?
I don't know what to make of this opinion. And as counsel in the Zarowski case, I shouldn't even take a guess. Mm. But I think it's an interesting opinion for everyone to read and try to get a beat on where we are generally today on this issue across Texas, right? What is happening when a pregnancy doesn't work out the way everyone hopes it will, or when the mother's life is at risk, or when her health is at risk, when her health is put at risk by the pregnancy? Mm-hmm. What are we going to do about that? What can parents do? What can doctors do? I think that the order is wrestling with this, and the Zarowski case hopefully will give us some clarity on what happens across the board. Mm.
Are women who, God forbid, may face a similar complication as Ms. Cox did, are they in a better position or a worse position because of this opinion in Ms. Cox's case?
That is a question that's yet to be determined. Mm-hmm. I think we're still digesting this order tonight. We got it just hours ago, and I just don't know. The only finality I have is that for Ms. Cox and her family in Texas, this procedure ultimately was blocked. Obviously, they're out of state, but for other folks, I think we're just going to find out as we move forward. Mm-hmm. what happens in Texas to families that are just facing this really, really real and really challenging moment. Just to have to involve the legal system in all of that, I think you see it in the order tonight from the Supreme Court. It makes things extra difficult.
Because as we saw today, Ms. Cox did not have time to wait a weekend for the Supreme Court to get back here.
These are emergent situations, almost always, because as things progress, they can quite quickly become significant health risks and do lasting damage to the health of the mother. And that's the case of Amanda Zarowski, right? By not being able to get the care she needed when she needed it, she ultimately went into sepsis, and it did some unfortunate damage to her. And she's brave enough to share that story, and she put her name on that story, her family's name on the story, just to tell people how serious this is.
What do you think it says about these women who are, willing to put their name and face out about such a sensitive, controversial issue? What does that say about how deeply that this has impacted them and how deeply they care about it?
They're super brave, and I think we owe them a debt of gratitude for telling their stories. And I understand that there are a lot of people out there that disagree with abortion and have issues with with all sorts of issues related to abortion. But I would ask people to just listen to these heartbreaking stories. So many of our plaintiffs desperately want to have a baby. And sometimes, unfortunately, you just get a terrible diagnosis. And the best way to have a baby is to have an abortion, medically appropriate, doctor-approved abortion, and then try again, so that you can bring life into this world. I think that's what so many of our folks are trying to do here. And so, I would ask the folks that disagree to pray for those families and pray for their successful outcomes.
Well, Mr. Kaplan, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
in.